I like to think of the technology transfer process for purposes of this seminar as a 4-stage process. Stage 1 being starting with the invention. That we'll talk more about, but would be disclosure of the invention and protecting the invention and an intellectual property strategy. Stage 2 then is about the commercialization and marketing strategy for that particular invention. Stage 3 would be structuring a license agreement, giving rights for commercialization to that invention. Stage 4 is managing that license agreement with a company and monitoring it on its path to commercialization and its monetization and license income distribution backed by IP policy. We'll go a little more into each of those 4 stages. Before we do that, I think I just want to give you a sense for these are the 4 stages. What is the timeline? And since patents are a big part of protecting inventions, especially academic medical center inventions, inventions that relate to biotech and medical products, I want to remind you again of what the patent timeline typically is and how what we just talked about, the 4 stages, would match up to this timeline. So provisional application is the first step when you protect your invention with a patent. You typically file a provisional patent application. That takes about a year. You file a PCT application. The application publishes. This is a big critical step in the patent timeline prosecution, the national stage application. From here to here is 30 months. And prosecution will continue depending on the technology. An invention might take a few years to get issued patent, maybe more than 1 patent with different set of claims. So that's the patent timeline, and we talked about this is where you do research before this time, before any public disclosure, and this is when you submit an invention and we evaluate the invention and file maybe a patent application. Particularly in our office, we tend to do this invention evaluation twice because there are 2 critical times, right when you file the provisional patent application, which you absolutely want to do before a public disclosure, and when you file this PCT application, which is your last chance to add to that application and make a robust application. So it gives us 2 shots to really triage this. So this is the second stage, which is marketing to potential industry partners. Depending on the invention, this can start right off when we have the invention all the way till it is whenever it is partnered. And once you've started marketing, if you find the right partner, you start license negotiations, and that may happen at any time till the technology is licensed. Okay, so let's go back to stage 1 and take a look at it a little more. We start again with you as the investigator. When you have the invention, so it's really important you, over time, learn to think of your science through the lens of when is it an invention. And once you have an invention, your first step is to identify your contact person in your tech transfer office and fill out the invention disclosure form. So disclose the invention. Typically, it takes a few weeks, depending on the technology, depending on the complexity and the data available for the evaluating the invention. This is the time the Technology Commercialization Office needs to go back and forth with you as the inventor to evaluate the invention in terms of trying to understand its patentability, or is it a know-how, is it intellectual property that will take the form of it's a copyright or a know-how or a tangible material. Typically, the Tech Transfer Office will let you know what the outcome of that invention evaluation or triage is. If their decision is not to file a patent application, and then you can go ahead, publish, and disclose the invention publicly. In the event the decision is a patent should be filed, you will work with the Tech Transfer Office and the outside counsel, which is most Tech Transfer offices work with outside law firms to file the patent application. And this, again, could take a few weeks. And you will be actively working with the Tech Transfer Office to file the patent application in reviewing the application, answering some technical questions to make sure that the patent filing captures your invention accurately and robustly. The Tech Transfer Office will let you know that the patent application is on file with the USPTO, and after that, you can go ahead, disclose in a talk, or a manuscript can publish, etc. Even after the patent's filed, there'll be communications from the law firm and your Tech Transfer Office, because there's a lot of formal paperwork and assignment documents, etc., related to the patent application that needs to be completed. Okay. Also, just as you're learning about the process, you should know the Tech Transfer Office takes care of lots of other reporting obligations that arise when you disclose an invention. For example, with NIH, every invention that's reported, also the Tech Transfer Office has a reporting obligation back to the government because it's a federally funded invention arising out of federally funded research. So you've submitted the invention disclosure, and so what happens once you've submitted it? What does the invention triage process look like? So the invention is considered from this triangulation, 3 parts to really evaluate it. Evaluate it from its intellectual property perspective, from its stage science and stage of development, and its commercial potential. What's the marketplace? So when you're evaluating, as we talked about in the last seminar, you look at the prior art for patentability analysis. You try to understand what is the unmet need, or what is the problem that this invention is solving. What's the potential product based on this discovery? What is the stage of this discovery? Is it an idea? Is it validated? What step of development is it? What further development will be needed? What's the competitive landscape around it look like? Are there 10 ways to solve the same problem already on the market? And really, in the medical path, have to think about reimbursement and the regulatory pathway. What would a clinical trial look like? It will solve a rare disease. Are there clinical markers, biomarkers? What is the clinical trial design going to look like? Is it going to be reimbursed? If it's a diagnostic, you're going to ask questions. Is it, so what? Is it going to be any payer going to pay? Is that diagnostic test going to lead to a different therapeutic intervention? So you're evaluating this in terms of its commercialization, productization potential. And if it is patentable, you're asking, what is the scope of the patent? And if it's not a patent, is this a copyright? Is there other asset in terms of, is it a tangible material that can be useful to become a product, or advanced technology, other technologies, and lead to commercialization? We also, it's a good time to evaluate what other obligations are around this invention. Was the industry-sponsored research, and some obligations to report and license this to that sponsor. This could be where you got funding from an industry. Could also be it could be through a material transfer agreement with industry, where an sponsor would have given you enough funding, but maybe some tools and compounds, etc., to help your research. Also, often inventions, they're inventors from different institutions that are co-inventors, and therefore the invention is jointly owned with another institution, and so the decision is not one institution alone, it's both institutions together. So The process, as I described on the previous slide, you can see is extremely thorough. It tries to understand all the issues around the invention, the positive and the negative. It is transparent. For most tech transfer offices, it's a very team-based approach. Within the office, there are people with different backgrounds and expertise who weigh in to address each of those three aspects: the commercialization potential, the intellectual property potential, and the science behind it. But I say it's team-based in that the tech transfer office works very closely with you, the inventor, in making those assessments. And this is important because then this paves the way for understanding what is the patent strategy, commercialization strategy, and all the, once you file that patent, once you've disclosed that invention, all the downstream activities that happen. In different offices, develop different best practices to make sure they have good documentation around the invention assessment, consistency from different inventions within the office. The process also tries to make sure it addresses concerns that inventors may have about their ideas and inventions, about it being protected, being put on the right path in a timely way. And therefore, it's very focused on timeline-driven deliverables, especially when it's a patent application which has, as I showed you, a very fixed timeline, both for strategic decisions and costs. So when and how should you, as an inventor, disclose an invention? Definitely, if it's an invention, before you share that idea with in a public audience, in a public forum. And when you know that discovery or that science, you can articulate your invention as what is the solution it is to which unmet need, and what is the key aspects, novel aspects, and that's a good time to disclose it to your tech transfer office. And when you disclose that, most tech transfer offices have a invention disclosure form, and so provide the tech transfer office with some key information about your technology. And the more you understand about patentability and the tech transfer process, that helps you understand why it's important to provide that information so the evaluation can be accurate and timely. I would just like to say a good rule of thumb for most of the investigators, that academic medical researchers, a good time, if you have not disclosed it earlier, is when you have your draft manuscript ready. And you're right before you submit it, that's a good time to submit it to the tech transfer office. It is a good timeline and sufficient time to do invention triage while it's being reviewed for publication. Yep. Yes.
Does the submission of an abstract constitute public disclosure?
So, so the question is, does the submission of an abstract constitute a public disclosure? Some of it is covered in last session's slides, but the answer to that is if the abstract is going to be published in a book that is going to be distributed at the conference, then it is a public disclosure.
At the time it's published or at the time you submit it?
At the time it will be published, when the book will be published. For example, my personal experience is with ASH. You submit the abstract. There's a review process. Most conferences, the review process is not a public disclosure. But once they accept your abstract for a poster or for a talk and publish that book, the day that book goes online, that's public.